Thank you, Charlene. This is the Harwich Planning Board meeting of Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. It is being held via remote participation only. Access is available through gotomeeting.com and live broadcast in Channel 18. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Harwich Planning Board is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. I'd like to take a roll call. The board members present. Duncan Berry is present. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick here.
David Harris is still not here. Joe McFarland.
I'm here.
Mary Maslowski.
Mary Maslowski here.
Alan Peterson.
Alan Peterson here.
Arthur Rouse.
Arthur Rouse here.
Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz here.
Great. So we have a joint public hearing to start with this evening pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 83, Section 10, and Chapter 295 of the Code of the Town of Harwich. Town engineer, acting as the Town Harwich Stormwater Authority, will hold a joint public hearing with the Planning Board. Would you like me to read this part in, or is this already opened?
You can go ahead.
Section A, Witchmere Harbor Real Estate LLC, applicant and owner, care of David L. Michnowitz of Coastal Engineering Company Incorporated, representative, seeks a local stormwater permit to demolish existing restaurant building, swimming pools, and patios, and replace with a new restaurant building, swimming pools, and patios. This existing, quote, coastal bar, unquote, building will be turned 90 degrees and moved back from the beach. The proposed project will decrease site coverage in the project area by 1,724 plus or minus square feet. The proposed area of land disturbance is approximately 83,900 plus or minus square feet. The application is pursuant to the Town of Harwich comprehensive stormwater and illicit discharge requirements. Property is located at 23 Snow Inn Road, map 8, parcel P2 in the RH3 and RL zoning districts. PB 2020-32, Witchmere Harbor Real Estate LLC, applicant and owner, care of attorney Andrew Singer, representative, seeks to amend the site plan review special permits granted in cases PB 2019-27 and PB 2020-23, or in the alternative, a new special permit to make additional alterations to the previously approved design in the beach club, to redesign the pool area, to include an additional pool, construct a new infant pool, create a fenced natural lawn service alley along the east side, and make accompanying landscape and walkway revisions. The application is pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Section 325-55, Site Plan Review, and Chapter 400. Property is located at 23 Snow Inn Road, map 8, parcel P2-12 in the RH3 and RL zoning districts. The Planning Board hearing is continued from the 9th of February, 2021. So.
Thank you, Duncan. Charlene, do you want me to kick this off?
Sure, for the stormwater part. Yep.
Exactly. I'm not going to handle your part because you're too good at that than I am. Just to kick off, this is a local stormwater permit that was filed pursuant to the comprehensive stormwater and illicit discharge regulations that the town has adopted. The applicant has filed the application. The applicant has filed the application fee and has filed a complete application. I reviewed the application for completeness. Everything was included except for a couple little items that I wanted to have included in the plan set. We met I met with the applicant or the applicant's engineer, Coastal Engineering, Dave and Stacy. We met on February 5th and then again on February 8th. We basically met on the 5th to go over my initial comments regarding the project. And just as a quick aside, as the planning board has seen this come before them in a number of, I guess, iterations and revisions, I have as well. So while this is the first time they're filing for the stormwater permit, I have been reviewing the stormwater throughout the process. So we've been in almost constant dialogue as the design has evolved. And there's just a couple last things that I'm looking to be submitted to complete this. One of the and those will be conditions of approval. You know, after we get through this meeting here, and hear from the public if there is other comments as well. One of those conditions, just to make everyone aware, is that I'm requiring a plan to be submitted, what I'm calling a comprehensive grading and drainage plan, just because of the way the disciplines were split on this project with the landscape architect and an engineer. There wasn't a comprehensive plan, but Coastal has acknowledged that they will provide that, and basically it'll just be a comprehensive plan that shows the grading and drainage and how existing and proposed contours and how those proposed contours tie down to existing, just so we can see how water flows and whatnot. So that was one condition that we will look to include. A second condition would be, and some of these other conditions are really just programmatic, associated with the stormwater and illicit discharge regulations, and that would be the owner is responsible for maintaining the operation and maintenance records as submitted for the stormwater system, and an as-built plan will be required to be submitted. So, you know, there has been a fair amount of back and forth, some supplemental calculations following our conversations on 2.5 and 2.8. Supplemental calculations were submitted on 2.9. I reviewed those and found those satisfactory, and those related to the sizing of the closed piping system. So, you know, the overall, the stormwater system, based on my review, is in compliance with the Mass Stormwater Standards, which is what essentially the comprehensive stormwater and illicit discharge regulations mirror. It's a combination of that and EPA. So I am satisfied with what has been submitted, the conversations to date, and the follow-up that will be submitted as a condition of approval. With that, I would like to open it to the public or board members or anyone that may have comments or questions or anything regarding the stormwater system. And Charlene, if you want to add anything on, please do.
No, I was just going to clarify that at this point, the questions would only relate to the stormwater part of the public hearing, not the rest of it. We still need to hear from Andrew Singer, his presentation on the waiver of site plan.
Mary? You have to unmute.
Just one question through you to the town engineer. Griffin, as far as conditions are concerned onto any potential special permit conditions, is it sufficient for us to just include that any of your conditions, any of the conditions required by you in your role as the town engineer are conditions for the special permit, or do we need to enumerate each one of your conditions?
You know, it's a good question, Mary. I think, you know, we are doing this as a joint public hearing, but, you know, as a matter of course, I think in the future, there will be many times when the stormwater hearing will happen before the planning board hearing. So in which case my conditions would already be issued. So you could just say, you could simply refer to the town engineer or the conditions of the stormwater approval as part of the planning board approval, if that's appropriate.
Okay. Thanks, Griffin.
I wanted to note on the side here that Mr. Harris has joined us. Are there any public comment for Mr. Ryder?
And just one thing, Duncan, so the public is aware, you know, Dave and I had gone over this, and you know, we've talked about this enough that I told Dave that he didn't need to do a specific presentation on the stormwater. But if anyone has any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay.
Thanks.
Duncan, there are two new callers on. If I can get them identified, that would be great. Dave, I know you're on the line and also on the phone. Dave Harris, if you can talk, I can figure out which caller you are.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Okay, you're caller number 10.
Son.
And there is another caller. If somebody's called in, if you could let me know who you are.
Arlene Bill from Witchman, correct?
Yep, I've got you, Bill. Okay, well, they're not letting us know. That's okay. Go ahead, Duncan.
Okay, so I think that concludes that part then. If we don't have any comments from the public or the board, Charlene, did you want to make your?
I think at this point you would want to hear from Andrew Singer.
Okay, let's hear from Andrew first, then. Thank you.
Good evening. This is Andrew Singer. Before we jump into the planning board, just a question for Griffin. Since he is the approving authority, does he need to do we need a motion or anything after there's no public comment, or it's just approved?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would close the stormwater portion of the public hearing. And then with that, following that, I will issue my approval with conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Not hearing any questions.
I just wanted to clarify the process. Thank you, Griffin. To the planning board for the request for the amendment to the site plan review special permit. As was read, this is a subset. What was just approved for the local stormwater permit was the whole project. You've approved the project already. We're here before you for a minor amendment. It is an amendment that takes place within the fencing. This is all on the ground. It's not something that you will see. There is no change to the use, no change to the approved buildings, no change to the approved parking. What is being requested is to reconfigure some of the pool decking to split off the infant pool, so it would be a third pool, smaller, obviously, within the fenced area of the beach club, and to add a natural lawn area within the fencing on the east side as a service entryway from into the beach club itself. Very minor changes. They are shown on the plans that Coastal Engineering has submitted. We reviewed these with the Conservation Commission and they unanimously approved the minor amendment. We reviewed these with the Board of Appeals and they also unanimously approved the minor amendment. We are here if you have any questions, but we're requesting that the board also approve the minor amendment to substitute in these new plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Singer. So the interim town planner?
Thank you. So the applicant has requested no waivers on this application. Regarding health comments, must have a Board of Health pool application permit and passing an inspection prior to use. Owner contractors are responsible for ensuring that all requirements under 105 CMR 435.00 are met. Food service permits are required prior to opening, and the applicant must submit kitchen design plans to the health department prior to construction. Fire and highway had no comments or issues. Water department did indicate that there is an 8-inch water main that will need to be moved 2 feet away from all structures. Field lock gaskets to be used at all joints and fixtures. An approved inspector be on site for moving or reinstalling all water, main service, fire services, and pressure test of new main being installed to the water department guidelines. Town engineer and I will cover our comments. The town engineer and I reviewed the plans back on December 15th. All items raised at that time have been addressed. However, we will be needing a revised site plan showing the correct lot coverage. That's very minor and not a big issue. The board did receive one letter from an abutter, which is attached to your application and was posted online. That letter had to do not so much with the request before the board this evening, but they had a question as to whether or not Witchmere was going to remain a private club. That really has nothing to do with the board's review, but certainly you can discuss that if you wish. The applicant did receive Zoning Board of Appeals relief on January 27th, 2021 to amend their special permit, and standard conditions are recommended. And that's my report.
Thank you very much. Are there any members of the board to ask questions at this point? Mary, I see your hand.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. One quick question through you to Charlene. Charlene, do you need a revised site plan prior to construction, or are you okay with the as-built being sufficient? Because I didn't see a condition.
I'm actually fine with the as-built being submitted. It's a minor change in the number. It just should be reflected at some point, and that would be on the as-built plan.
Okay, I didn't see any condition to that effect. That's why I asked. Thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? I don't hear any from the public. So going once, going twice. So do we want to close this hearing, I think?
I make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Thank you, Joe. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Bill. Let's do a roll call.
This is Dave Harris. I'd like to hear an answer from the applicant regarding whether this is going to be a public restaurant or a private club.
Through the chair, this is Andrew Singer. I'd be happy to address that. There will be no change to the approved use. This is going to remain as a private facility, not open to the general public outside of the site events, the hotel, the beach club, the uses that are on the site. It is going to remain the same as it is.
Thank you.
And Duncan?
Yeah.
Before you move forward in voting, because there are seven regular members present for this particular hearing, Mr. Rouse does not need to vote on this application because we do have 7 regular members. At one of the next applications, he will be needed for a vote.
Correct. Okay. Very good. So we have a motion and a second to close the hearing. So I'd like to take a roll call vote on that. Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Joe McParland.
Joe McParland, aye.
Mary Maslowski.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson.
Alan Peterson, aye.
And Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move that we vote to adopt the following proposed findings of fact. 1, the property is located within the RH-3 and R-L zoning districts. 2, the proposed changes of use and alterations to the site were approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals pursuant to Board of Appeals case number 2019-28, case number 2020-32, and case number 2020-45. 3, the Conservation Commission approved the changes within conservation jurisdiction pursuant to Mass DEP Southeast 32-2383 and Southeast 32-2387. 4, the use as developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood. 5, the specific site is an appropriate location for such a use, structure, or condition. 6, there will be no nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians. 7, adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operation of the proposed use.
David Harris, second.
Do I have a second?
David Harris seconded.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Dave. Roll call vote. Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
Dave Harris,
David Harris, aye.
Joe McFarland,
Aye. Joe McFarland, aye.
Mary Maslowski,
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Bill Stoltz,
Bill Stoltz, aye.
and Alan Peterson.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I move that we vote to approve with conditions case number PB 2020-32, Witchmere Harbor Real Estate LLC, for an amended site plan review special permit pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Section 325-55, site plan review, and Chapter 400, which was previously granted in cases PB 2019-27 and PB 2020-23, to make additional alterations to the previously approved design of the beach club, to redesign the pool area to include an additional pool, construct a new infant pool, create a fenced natural lawn service alley along the east side, and make accompanying landscape and walkway revisions for property located at 23 Snow Inn Road, map 8, parcel P2-12, in the RH3 and R-L zoning districts. The decision is based on the aforementioned findings of fact and the fact that the application meets the necessary requirements and criteria for approval pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, and the following conditions. A, all zoning board of appeals, board of health, and conservation commission requirements shall be met. B, the conditions imposed pursuant to planning board cases PB 2019-27 and PB 2020-23 shall be adhered to. C, all signage shall comply with the sign code and building department requirements. D, all lighting shall comply with the lighting code requirements. This decision shall be recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds. F, conformance with all review procedure requirements outlined pursuant to Section 400-18G inspection, certificate of completion, and as-built plans, which shall include the correct lot coverages of the Code of the Town of Harwich, shall be met. And G, any conditions required by the town engineer as the town, in his role as the Town of Harwich Stormwater Authority, as a part of the approval process for the local stormwater permit.
thank you.
David Harris, second.
Thank you, David. I'd like to do a roll call vote, please. Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick,
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris,
David Harris, aye.
Joe McFarland,
Joe McFarland, aye.
Mary Maslowski,
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson,
Alan Peterson, aye.
and Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
So now we move on to item 3A, public hearings, our continuance of PB 2020-28, Cape Cod Oil Company, H. Tasha PR of MJT Enterprises as applicant. Jacob.
You don't need to read the whole thing into the record. You have already opened this one before.
Okay, the applicant has requested a continuance to April 13th.
Mr. Chair,
This
I move that we,
is Joe McFarland. I move to continue the matter to April 13th, 2021.
second,
Thank you, Mary. Roll call, Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick,
Craig Chadwick, aye. And I just note that we should amend that to show that it's no earlier than 6:30 p.m.
good point, thank you. David Harris,
David Harris, aye.
Joe McFarland,
Joe McFarland, aye.
Mary Maslowski,
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson,
Alan Peterson, aye.
Arthur Rouse,
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Thank you. Number B is also a continuance, having been continued from February 9th. This is PB 2020-34, Cool Change LLC, Allen Harbor Marine. And applicant and owner, care of Rob O'Neill, representative, seeks a site plan review and use special permit pursuant to sections 325-55 and 325-13, use table, paragraph 4.19, and section 325-51 to construct a 4,102 square foot commercial building for marine use, boat maintenance and repair, and associated parking at property located at 282 Route 28, map 12, parcel G2-1 in the CH1 zoning district. Again, continued from February 9th. So do we have Mr. O'Neill?
Yes, I am present.
So let's continue with this process then. With you.
Excellent. Okay. So where we left off from the previous meeting in January was that there were some comments regarding the parking and the wheel stops. So we had since made those corrections and updated the plans and sent them over to the planning board in early February. And then the meeting last month or earlier on the 9th was continued. So we're just looking for the approval on that package.
Very good. Was there any input from the interim town planner?
Yes, thank you. So at your last meeting, the board did request additional information, including landscaping, updated renderings, and updated site plans showing wheel stops along the easterly parking, the use of the 2 parking spaces on the westerly side closest to the building to be used only during restaurant hours, and parking space dimensions. All of these have been submitted as requested. As we noted previously, we still do encourage 1 central curb cut because this is a change of use. This would need to go to Mass DOT, who may say the curb cuts are fine the way they are. They may say that there only needs to be 1. So it will be up to them. Since the last meeting, there was a letter received from an abutter, Linda Reed. You do have a copy of that in your packet, and it was also available on the town website. The Zoning Board of Appeals did approve the variances for setbacks regarding the building and parking pursuant to their case number 2020-41. Just to remind the board, there is an easement for parking for the restaurant next door, which is Villa Roma. The parking needs for the proposed marine use and that of the restaurant really offset each other of when they are needing that parking. At this time, it does appear that all requirements of the zoning bylaw have been met, and we are recommending some reasonable conditions be imposed. A fully compliant septic system must be approved prior to any building permit issued. B, any work in the FEMA flood zone requires Conservation Commission approval, as this is land subject to coastal storm flowage. C, a Mass Department of Transportation, Mass DOT curb cut may be required as this is a change of use. Any changes to the entrance to the site as a result of this review shall not require further review from the planning board. A copy of the Mass DOT curb cut permit shall be filed with the planning office. D, all signage shall comply with the sign code and building department requirements. E, all lighting shall comply with the lighting code. F, no outside storage of boats or other materials shall be permitted. G, any changes to the approved site may require additional review and approval from the planning board. H, this decision shall be recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds. And finally, I, conformance with all review procedure requirements outlined pursuant to the code of the town of Harwich, section 400-18G, inspections, certificate of completeness, and as-built plan shall be met.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from the board? Yes, Mary.
Just a point of order, Duncan, I do think the letter from the abutter needs to be read into the public hearing record.
For some reason, I don't have it at the top of my stack here, or wait a minute. Is it right here? Mary, do you happen to have it? Could you read it in instead of me wasting further time?
Sure, I do.
Thank you.
It is addressed to the Town of Harwich Planning Board regarding 282 Route 28, Cool Change LLC. Dear members, I'm writing as the owner of 276 Route 28, the west side of Budding property. I have two concerns. The first and major concern is the probability of stormwater runoff from the subject property. The elevation of the subject property is higher than my adjoining property, and I am concerned with the increased elevation, the size of the building, and the majority of the lot being covered to provide parking, that rainwater will drain to the lowest point, which is the northwest corner of my lot, the area of the 3 overflow parking spaces and the rain garden in the dogleg portion of the subject property. All of the lots along Route 28 slope from the road downward to the rear of the properties. The lowest point is where the subject property meets the northwest corner of my lot. Tyler Lane and its cul-de-sac are also a higher elevation than the area where my lot meets the dogleg portion of 282 Route 28. I'm hoping that perhaps a driveway curbing along the paved portion between the building and along the stockade fenced portion that leads to the rear parking spaces might stop the stormwater runoff and direct the water toward the rain garden. The second concern is regarding the water tank within the building. I see on the drawings that the tank is alarmed, but in the case of a tank failure, 1,500 gallons of water is a lot of water that could rush in many directions. In case of an accident, is there any safety plan for the tank? Will the tank remain filled throughout the portion of the year when the repair work is happening, even when there are no employees on the property? Thank you for your consideration. Linda Reed, owner of 276 Route 28.
Thank you so much. Do we have any comments from the members of the board?
I have a couple of questions for Mr. O'Neill.
Please, Joe.
Yeah, Mr. O'Neill, you have a, looks like a metal building that you have put up on that back part of that lot. Is that going to stay there, or are you going to move it when you build your building?
I don't believe I understand the building you're referencing. A metal building?
It's like a metal shed.
I'm not familiar with that structure on this property.
It's on your property, pal.
If I
Right
might,
behind-
there's currently no building on that property.
Say again?
It's Charlene, the interim town planner. There is no structure on that property.
I went back down there and looked at it the other day, and there's a small metal, I'd call it a shed, and I think it's on the little part of his property, not the main property, but the little piece that goes around behind the Villaroma. Maybe it's not his. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
There's Villaroma's property, there's a second property, and then that little dog leg is even behind that property. So there is a property in between. It could be on that middle property, but it's not on this particular property.
That's my question. It's not on your property, Mr. O'Neill.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, and I have just one other question. I looked at the plan, obviously, and between the Villaroma driveway, I'll call it, I don't know what it is, but that abuts your property, can they come out of the Villaroma and across your property and onto 28?
Yes.
It'll be designed in such a way that in other words, they don't have to come out of the Villaroma. They could come across over to your property and out through your parking lot.
That's correct.
But I want to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Arthur, it looked like you had your hand up.
I did. I was agreeing. I understand what Joe was talking about, but Charlene had mentioned that it was a little parcel there. I know where Joe was talking about, but Charlene was right. I think it's the other abutter's property. Where that little.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't go all the way down there and look at it, so you're probably right.
Greg, Dave, Alan, any other questions? No? Anybody in the public? Any comments, questions from members of the public? Mr. Winston?
Yeah, yes. I would like to ask a question. This building, I've looked at it, scrutinized it. It's hard to see as I'm looking at it from Route 28, but it's a steel building, which I don't think is appropriate for the village or for Route 28. And to my knowledge, there's only one other steel building, and that would be down in South Harwich, which is an auto mechanic shop. Is this building going to be buffered by green space and trees so that it will not be visible from the street?
It will be visible from Route 28, but there'll be landscaping and trees along the Time Lane side behind where it abuts the condos, and there'll be an 8-foot fence along the west side of the building.
And how far off the street is it, approximately?
Stu, do you know that off the top of your head? Stu Clark is our engineer, who's on the line as well.
It's about 80 feet off of 28.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, something like that, because that's a deep spot.
Yeah, it's actually almost 94 feet back. And if I might, Mr. Chairman, through you, under site plan review, there is no provision or lawful way for the board to not entertain a metal building if that is what has been proposed. The board cannot get into aesthetics in this particular area.
Right. Thank you.
Yes.
Are there any other questions from the public?
Yeah, this is Roger Grosskopf. I'm one of the abutters. I guess in a similar vein, I guess we did review the landscape plans that were submitted, and I was satisfied with what got added in terms of trees on the side and the back. In terms of aesthetics, I know I talked to somebody at the planning board earlier a few weeks back that color, I guess, is not really an element to what you guys approve. And I think that we've spoken a little bit with the applicants and like to at least have a discussion with them about the color choice at some point, but it sounds as if that's not really an element of consideration for today.
That's correct. Appreciate your input, though.
I have just one brief question for Mr. O'Neill.
Yes, Mr. McCollum.
Mr. O'Neill, is that your property across the street, across 28, where all those boats are stored?
Down the street, 28. That is Allen Harbor's. Yeah, and I'm just their construction manager, but I believe the property you're referring to is Allen Harbor's.
Thank you.
Joe, are you talking about the one across from the post office?
No. This is the one. Well, yeah, it is a little bit across from the post office. Yeah.
Okay, just clarifying. Any further questions? Hearing none. Yes.
Just very briefly, with regard to some of the comments made in the letter, the applicant did submit stormwater drainage calculations, and Griffin's still on the line. But as far as I know, those passed, those were fine. And all the drainage is going to be taken care of on the site. It's not allowed to go off into other properties. And also the floor drain in the actual building, that's something required under the building code.
Yep.
And that's if there's any water or any fluids or what have you that may come from, working on the boats that would end up in that that container in the floor, the basin of the floor. It's a floor drain. So if that ever filled up with, 1,500 gallons of water, I think the whole place is going to be a problem, not just that drain.
Right. Was there any, just a quick question, Charlene, was there any timeline on the Mass DOT curb cut possibility for a second, or is this like an open-ended contingency?
Seriously, God only knows how long it could take to go through Mass DOT.
Right.
It is the opinion of myself and the town engineer, because this is a change of use, that Mass DOT will want to have a curb cut permit. Stranger things have happened and they may say, nope, it's not needed. So, but they do need to at least contact Mass DOT and provide the town with evidence that they've done so.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry.
Well, we've started that process, and I can send over the what we have so far, showing you guys we've started that. I think we're at a point now where they're looking for us as far as getting approval on your end and vice versa. So that process has been.
Mr. Chairman, can I please add that Mass DOT will not act on a permit until we have all ministerial permits in place first?
Thank you for the clarification.
What Stuart said.
Yep. Great. Makes sense. Okay. Any further questions? Yes, Mr. Winston.
Yeah, I'd like to direct this to Chairman Barry and also Mary Maslowski. It's complicated. It's hard for me to understand this. And I'm not saying that the planning board, obviously it may have gotten to a point where the planning board doesn't have any jurisdiction over this particular building, but it does concern me that we just at a point where we're about to lose the handlers building, and magnificently we have a view of Allen Harbor. This building is not appropriate for Route 28 if it's visible from the street. Could there be any more something that could sweeten this a little bit so that it's visibility? We're making a mistake here, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mary. I think you have your hand up.
So Greg, Charlene is 100% right. We're in the planning board. This isn't a historic district. A historic district is completely different, where we have some authority over the aesthetics of a building. This isn't that. This is planning board, and the zoning allows the building. We don't have any authority over that. They have provided landscape plans that meet all the requirements. Charlene has told us that in her staff report. So a metal building's allowed. It is what's permitted. So we just don't have the same kind of authority that you would have in the historic district, where you could then, negotiate over aesthetics and make certain requirements or have a certificate of appropriateness. It's just not the same situation.
So I asked Duncan, is this something we might want to consider in the future?
Well, all I can say is that I know that there are residents and business owners in that stretch of 28 who were inspired by the overlay district discussions that were held in the last 2 years in the Captain's Row area. And I know that they're interested in doing something. It's something that has to, be generated from bottom up. But that's exactly the antidote, I guess, that you're looking for, is something with the aesthetic teeth. And whether it's historic district or an overlay district that can impose those criteria and guidelines, that's the way to go. So
I appreciate your input. I always question something when it's something that just doesn't seem appropriate for our village, but there's nothing we can do. Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. Any further questions? So I think we need to have a motion here to close the hearing or something like that. Do I hear one?
Motion to close the public hearing, Joe McFarland.
Thank you, Mr. McFarland. Do I have a second?
Craig Chadwick, second.
Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. Roll call vote, Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Joe McParland.
Joe McParland, aye.
Mary Maslowski.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Arthur Rouse.
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Mr. Chairman, just again for clarification on this particular application, because there are 7 regular members who were at the previous public hearing, Arthur's vote won't be needed for this particular application.
Thank you very much.
Particular application, it won't be needed for this particular application.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm on.
What is that feedback?
Thank you, Charlene. I appreciate that. Mary?
Mr. Chair, this is Mary.
Hello? Yes?
I move that we vote to adopt the following findings of fact. 1, that the property is located within the CH-1 zoning district. 2, that subject is burdened by a parking easement by the adjacent parcel to the west. 3, the marine use is allowable with a use special permit. 4, dimensional variances for the building and parking setbacks were approved by the Harwich Zoning Board of Appeals pursuant to case number 2020-41. 5, appropriate and adequate landscaping has been provided. 6, appropriate and adequate parking shall be provided on the subject site. 7, the use as developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood. 8, the specific site is an appropriate location for such a use. 9, there will be no nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians. 10, adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operation of the proposed use, including appropriate sewage treatment.
David Harris, second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Roll call vote, Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Joe McParland.
Joe McParland, aye.
Mary Maslowski.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I move that we vote to approve the following case with conditions. Case number PB 2020-34, Cool Change LLC, for a use special permit pursuant to section 325-13, use table, paragraph 4.19 and section 325-51 for marine use, boat maintenance and repair for property located at 282 Route 28, map 12, parcel G2-1 in the CH-1 zoning district, based on the aforementioned findings of fact and the fact that the application meets the necessary requirements and criteria for approval pursuant to the code of the town of Harwich. The following condition is imposed. 1, no outside storage of boats or other materials shall be permitted.
David Harris, second.
Duncan, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Roll call vote, Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Joe McParland.
Joe McParland, aye.
Mary Maslowski.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Thank you. So,
Mr. Chairman, I move that
Yes.
we vote to approve with conditions case number PB 2020-34, Cool Change LLC, for a site plan review special permit pursuant to section 325-55 to construct a 4,102 square foot commercial building for marine use, boat maintenance and repair, and associated parking at property located at 282 Route 28, map 12, parcel G2-1 in the CH-1 zoning district, The decision is based on the aforementioned findings of fact and the fact that the application meets the necessary requirements and criteria for approval pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, and the fact that the marine use is permitted by special permit in the zoning district. The following conditions are imposed. 1, a fully compliant septic system must be approved prior to any building permit issuance. 2, any work in the FEMA flood zone requires Conservation Commission approval, as this is land subject to coastal storm flowage. 3, no outside storage of boats or other materials shall be permitted. 4, a Massachusetts Department of Transportation, Mass DOT may be required as this is a change of use. Any changes to the entrance to the site as a result of this review shall not require further review from the Planning Board. A copy of the Mass DOT curb cut permit shall be filed with the Planning Office. 5, all signage shall comply with the sign code and building department requirements. 6, all lighting shall comply with the lighting code. 7, any changes to the approved site may require additional review and approvals from the Planning Board. 8, this decision shall be recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds. 9, conformance with all review procedure requirements outlined pursuant to section 400-18.g, inspection, certificate of completion, and as-built plan of the Code of the Town of Harwich shall be met.
Have a second?
David Harris, second.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Roll call vote. Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick?
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris?
David Harris, aye.
Joe McFarland?
Joe McFarland, aye.
Mary Maslowski?
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson?
Alan Peterson, aye.
Bill Stoltz?
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is...
Duncan, before you get going on that, just to clarify the board members who are eligible to vote on this.
Yes, thank you.
Because at the public hearing on this that was held back in January, Mr. McParlin was not present for that meeting. However, Arthur Rouse was. So in this particular case, Arthur will be eligible to vote on this and Mr. McParlin will not. Doesn't mean that they can't both ask questions. It's just Mr. McParlin won't be eligible to vote, but Arthur will. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for the clarification. So what we are facing now is continuance of PB 2020-26, Royal Apartments LLC as owner. Benjamin E. Zender, Esquire representative, seeks approval of special permits for multifamily use, site plan review, and Harwich Center Overlay District for the proposed use and additional parking and other appurtenances pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Section 325-51.q, approved at the 26th of September 2020 town meeting, Section 325-55, and Section 325-51.0 Harwich Center Overlay District, respectively. The property is located at 328 Bank Street, map 41, parcel N4 in the MRL zoning district. So we had a public hearing on this matter originally opened on the 19th of November. The board voted to continue the hearing and to allow for amendments to the application to include a Harwich Center Overlay District special permit, thus necessitating a new legal notice and re-notification of the abutters. A new public hearing was scheduled for Thursday, December 17th, not earlier than 6:30, and abutters were originally notified via certified mail on October 30th. However, the re-notification did not happen until December 10th, thus requiring a further continuance to January 12th, 2021. Testimony was taken at January 12th, 2021 meeting, and the hearing was further continued to February 9th, in part to request an opinion from Town Council. February 9th, 2021 could not move forward due to a typo in the agenda, as you'll all recall. The hearing was continued to today. So it looks as though we have a situation where I think what we are going to do is continue with the applicant. Is that correct? And so, Mr. Zender, would you like to take us?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Barry, and good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you all again in small little boxes. You may recall at the hearing on the 12th of January, the board continued the matter on our request to address 3 items that were outstanding. One was to allow your town council to provide an opinion as to whether or not your board had the authority to waive parking area setback requirements. 2 was to permit the applicant to meet with your town staff to determine whether or not it would be advisable to either propose constructing a sidewalk along Parallel Street to connect with Bank Street, or whether it would be more advisable to propose a contribution to your sidewalk fund, and finally, to allow the applicant to propose a restriction on some of the units for affordability. So in the meantime, I think your interim town planner will advise you as to town council's opinion as to whether the board has the authority to waive parking lot setback requirements. But we have provided the board, and in the record is a request that the board accept a condition that the applicant make a contribution to your sidewalk fund in the amount of $10,000 to be paid prior to the issuance of a building permit. We believe that is the most appropriate solution in that particular part of town. We have also proposed in letter form a proposed condition on any grant of a special permit that would propose that 2 of the studio units be set aside for applicants meeting affordability requirements or levels. So with the chairman's permission, I'm not going to launch into another explanation of the project because we had already done that, and I think we've gotten to a point in the hearing process where the members were asking questions. And so I'm on the line to answer any questions that you have. Also, Dave McNevich from Coastal Engineering, who's our site engineer, is here to answer any questions about site conditions, and also Alex Barden, who is the owner's rep, who's been with us from the very beginning on this and has a great body of knowledge about the project, is here to answer any questions that the board may have. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Zender. Ms. Greenhalgh, did you want to weigh in at this point?
Yes, thank you. As I had reviewed the last time, the applicant has requested 6 waivers from the filing fee, variance notation on the plan, existing driveways within 100 feet of the site, lighting, freestanding signs, and parking area requirements. We discussed those at length the last time, I believe, so I'm not going to get too much into that. With regard to comments from other boards and committees, the senior health agent reviewed the application for the approval of a multifamily use special permit in the Harwich Center Overlay District and a site plan review special permit at 328 Bank Street. The septic system was originally designed for 31 assisted living rooms, plus additional office space for a total of 4,773 gallons per day. The proposed floor plan shows that 33 bedrooms are proposed with a total flow of 3,630 gallons per day. As the plan is proposed, the health department has no concerns. However, we do require that a passing Title V inspection be submitted prior to any building permit approval. With regard to fire department, there were no issues for the planning board from fire for this project. Conservation, as proposed, all work is outside of the 100-foot buffer. Erosion control shall be installed on the 100-foot line to ensure work stays out of the conservation jurisdiction. Permits required if work will enter conservation jurisdiction. So long as no new activities happening in the 100-foot buffer, conservation has no jurisdiction. Police department, the deputy chief had the traffic officer look at the plans. Here are Officer Holmes' comments after meeting with Carla Burke via email December 22nd, 2020. I had a nice conversation with Carla and explained where our input comes from as far as looking at past crashes and traffic complaints. She was happy I listened to her voice and concerns. After talking with her, I did recognize one problem. The height and or location of the current fence along Bank Street limits the sight line looking north. Could we have planning recommend the fence be removed and or reduced in height to meet the provisions of the bulk height bylaw? No other concerns from me, meaning Officer Holmes. DPW, I'll review those in my comments, as well as engineering. I do need some water, hold on. At the January 12, 2021 public hearing, the board voted to request an opinion from town council on whether the application as presented is lawfully before the planning board and whether the planning board can act on the request before it. A copy of town council's opinion is attached for the board's review. However, a copy is not included in the electronic packet as this is privileged correspondence. I can publicly report that town council's opinion, it is town council's opinion that the board can act on the requests that are before the board. On Tuesday, January 19th, 2021, an on-site with Attorney Zender, two principals from the Royal Apartments, LLC, the DPW Director, Lincoln Hooper, DPW Road Manager, Chris Nickerson, and myself was held to discuss the sidewalk along Parallel Street. Based on that on-site, Mr. Hooper provided the following additional comments via email. As discussed in today's field, the town of Harwich has no plans to install a sidewalk on Parallel Street. That said, we did try to include a sidewalk on this section of Parallel Street in the Safe Routes to School grant that the town was awarded, which was pulled from consideration over project costs. Although Chris Nickerson, road manager, and I are ambivalent as to whether the planning board requires a sidewalk as part of their conditions of this private development, we would not be opposed to a short one being constructed to connect this project to the existing sidewalk on Bank Street. Given the lack of pedestrian connectivity on Parallel Street and the lack of any plans to construct one, we certainly understand if the planning board wants the applicant to make a payment to the town sidewalk fund in lieu of having them construct a sidewalk to nowhere. The applicant has requested that in lieu of contribution of $10,000 be made to the sidewalk fund. If the board is agreeable to this, I would recommend that the contribution be made prior to the issuance of the building permit, rather than the issuance of an occupancy permit as proposed by Attorney Zender. Number 3, all items of concern raised by the town engineer and the town planner have been met to date. 4, the requested waivers we believe are reasonable. 5, at this time, the plan and requirements of the zoning bylaw appear to have been met. 6, as of January 5, 2021, 16 emails and letters were received from abutters and a legal representative of a butter. These are not included again in the board, as the board members have already received these in a previous packet, and they are also available on the January 12, 2021 online agenda packet. As of February 16, 2021, 12 additional letters have been received. Copy of these letters are attached, and they were also on the online packet. 8, I generally do not comment beyond the requirements of the site plan review and special permits. However, I do want to point out that the various town departments, the town's professional staff, health, conservation, police, fire, DPW, engineering, and planning have reviewed and commented on this application. 9, additionally, the application before the planning board is not a quote unquote capital A affordable housing proposal, which would be a comprehensive permit, also known as a 40B. And this would have gone before the Zoning Board of Appeals. The application before the board is for multifamily housing. The applicant has agreed to restrict in perpetuity 2 of the studio units. We do recommend reasonable conditions be imposed, including the following. A, erosion control shall be installed and maintained during construction on the 100-foot conservation buffer line to ensure work stays out of the conservation jurisdiction. Permits from conservation shall be required if work enters conservation jurisdiction. B, a passing Title V inspection shall be submitted to the health department prior to any building permit approval. C, the existing fence on Bank Street shall be removed and or reduced in height to meet the provisions of the bulk height bylaw. D, as agreed by the applicant, 2 studio units shall be held in perpetuity for rent exclusively to persons meeting the guidelines for low and moderate income families as determined by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, quote unquote HUD, published income guidelines, and as may be from time to time amended. E, in lieu of constructing a sidewalk along parallel street, the applicant shall submit $10,000 to the town of Harwich through the planning office for the sidewalk fund prior to the issuance of a building permit. F, all signage shall comply with the sign code, historic district and historical commission and building department requirements. G, all lighting shall comply with the lighting code and historic district and historical commission requirements. H, appropriate approvals from the historic district and historical commission shall be required. I, any changes to the approved site plan may require additional review and approval from the planning board and the historic district and historical commission. Excuse me. J, the decision shall be recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds. And finally, K, conformance with all review procedure requirements outlined pursuant to section 400-18G, inspection, certificate of completion, and as-built plan of the code of the town of Harwich shall be met. And that concludes my comments for now.
Thank you very much, Ms. Greenhalgh. At this point, we have an opportunity for board members to comment, please. Yes, Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Attorney Zender. If the affordable deed restrictions, will those be held by the town or will they be held by the Affordable Housing Trust, or has that been determined yet? I don't know if you and Charlene had talked about that or not.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
We haven't really discussed that they're being held by any entity. This restriction would be a part of the decision that's recorded with the Registry of Deeds. We're more than happy to, work with Charlene and your town council to determine how that would actually be held. We haven't gotten that far.
I think Charlene's telling us that it's her last night tonight, so she won't be involved.
I have her cell number. I'll just give her a call. She won't care.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. I don't mean to be flip with the board. However the town wants us to structure that, we're more than happy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Craig, you need to unmute if you want to talk.
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Any other members of the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Bill.
Hi, Bill.
I have a question for Charlene. How many parking spaces are required for this project?
It's as many as they showed on the plan, which I believe is 43. Is that correct, gentlemen?
That is through you, Mr. Chair. The requirement is 40. The requirement is 41, and we're providing 43.
Okay. So there are 2 parking spaces on the parallel street side, which one is 10 feet from the lot line and one is 12 feet from the lot line. And that's the waiver I assume you're asking for. And so it would not hurt to not construct those 2 parking lots, correct?
For you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
The space along Bank, is the gentleman talking about the space along Bank Street?
Yes.
Yeah, that space actually provides, actually, I don't believe there's a proposed wooden landing and ramp there, so I believe that might go into a handicapped accessible unit. I'm going to let Mr. Barton, if he doesn't mind, comment on that, but I believe that space might provide handicapped access to direct entry into a handicapped accessible unit.
I might have misquoted it. It's along Parallel Street, not Bank Street.
Correct. We have probably 3 spots that you're talking about that are within 10 or 12 feet, but I don't think I do not believe we're asking for waiver on that. As the Harwich Center Overlay District, as we see, does not have any setbacks on the parking. But yes, we could theoretically remove 2 spaces if it pleased the board, but from previous comments, we've heard that it was all parking related, so we wanted to get as many spaces as possible.
I was with the understanding that the setback is 20 feet, Charlene, on the front.
Under the overlay district, the board can waive all setbacks for whatever they feel they need to.
I know we can waive it, but I'm asking that the setback is actually 20 feet before a waiver.
I believe, and somehow I don't have a plan with me, so I do apologize. So I'm going off the cuff here.
Through the chair.
Yes.
In 32542, I believe it's L, the parking setback requirement in the MRL and MRL1 district is 50 feet from the street, 50 feet from a sideline, and 50 feet from the rear. So those parking spaces that the members identified along Parallel Street are certainly within the required setback, but we've requested the waiver under the Harwich Center Overlay District permit. We are certainly more than willing to remove those 2 spaces closest to Parallel Street if the board wants, and we still would be within our 41 spaces as required by the multifamily dwelling bylaw.
That was what I thought. I would like to see those 2 removed if we could.
Certainly.
Do we have any further comment about the removal of those 2 spots by members of the board? I don't know whether I'm taking the absence of response as a positive or a negative.
Mr. Chairman, it certainly can be made a condition of approval if that's the direction that the board ultimately wants to go.
I think Bill makes a good point. Do we have a consensus on this, or? I mean, we have 2 to play with, or they have 2 to play with. Any thoughts, Mary?
I'm happy to go with the consensus of the board. You know, I see both sides. I can understand that the 2 along Parallel Street may be concerning for some. I was looking at it more that, you know, more parking the better in a multi-family dwelling, but I'm happy to go with the consensus of the board on that.
Right. I think the concern that has been brought up before has with that particular issue has been traffic on Parallel. And the question is, you know, what are the trade-offs involved? Again, I'm kind of agnostic about it at this point. So I'm happy to go with one way or another.
Mr. Chairman.
Dave Harris, Mr. Chairman, I have no objection to keeping the 2 extra 2 parking spaces, and the value they provide is that if the lot is full, it will prevent people from trying to park on Parallel Street, causing further congestion.
Good point. Mr. Chadwick?
I echo what Dave said. I was thinking in terms of additional spots would be helpful for somebody, for instance, TV cable person coming in to do some work rather than parking in Bank Street or Parallel Street. There assumedly would be open spaces that could be utilized within the existing plan. So I'd be in favor of keeping those 2 spots. Thank you.
Okay.
I agree, Mr. Chair.
You agree with that, Alan?
Yep.
So do we have a general consensus to go ahead with the requested full number, full complement? I think we have, I think that's kind of where we're laying. Okay, let's do that. Now, any further questions from the board? I see Mr. Reed is with us this evening, and I'm assuming that Mr. Reed would like to relay the contents of his letter from earlier this month, which I'm sure we have all read.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I represent David Plunkett and Gregory Winston of 109 Parallel Street, the direct westerly abutters, and they reside at that property. That's their full-time residence. Let me first say that I'm disappointed that we have not had the benefit of town council's opinion. I feel significantly disadvantaged to know only that she agrees that you can proceed without knowing how or why she reached that conclusion. I have submitted to you in an email of January 22nd and a second letter, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, of February 5th, my opinions that you may not waive these criteria for the granting of the special permit under Section 51Q for the multifamily housing. And following up, if I may, I believe on Mr. Stoltz's comment, we're not talking about just those 2 spaces that waivers are requested for. By my estimation, and the plan does not label the 50-foot setback requirement for parking, so I have to interpret it myself with the scale provided by Mr. McNevich. But it appears to me that 6 parking spaces along Parallel Street do not comply with the 50-foot setback. 8 spaces to the west, abutting my client's property, do not comply with the 50-foot setback. Another 8 spaces along the rear property line do not comply. And the 1 space in front of the building on Bank Street does not comply. That's a total of 23 of the 43 spaces do not comply with the 50-foot setback. That's the waiver they've requested, not just the 2 on Parallel Street. It doesn't make sense to me that you have a bylaw that sets forth a new use, in this case, multifamily housing, that's allowed by special permit for the first time in this new bylaw. And you set forth specific criteria for calculating the density that's permitted in such a multifamily use, and then allow an applicant to ask for a waiver of one of those criteria in order to greatly increase the density over what the bylaw permits. Site plan review is intended to mold and shape and add to and refine a project, not decide whether it's allowed or not. But if you grant a waiver that allows the doubling of the occupancy of this building to what would otherwise not be allowed, that amounts, in my mind, to a substantive change, not just to a molding and shaping of a project under site plan review, but to a substantive relief grant with just a waiver. Now, we're advised, the town council has said that you can do that if you want to. You have the authority to. But that doesn't mean you have to, and that doesn't mean you should. The waiver of parking criteria under the parking bylaw does not set forth any specific criteria for you to decide whether you should grant that or not. Mr. Zender, in his memo to you of January 21st, says that under the overlay district, the granting of a waiver can be done only if it does not substantially derogate from the intent and purpose of the bylaw, and does not cause any substantial detriment to the neighborhood. Well, if I'm correct, that 23 of the 43 parking spaces don't comply, and he's asking for a waiver for 23 out of the 43 spaces, more than half of the spaces. He's asking for you to allow them to double the occupancy of this property by such a waiver. That is not fulfilling the intent and purpose of this bylaw. That is substantially changing from it by a factor of 2. In addition, the parking will allow a lot more parking spaces, of course, because that's what it's about. The site presently requires only 14 parking spaces, the past use. The proposed use, if it is limited to the 50-foot setback, would only have about 20 spaces. And that would allow only approximately 13 one-bedroom apartments, not 26, including 4 two-bedroom apartments, more than double the occupancy, and more than double the parking spaces would be allowed without that waiver. And those parking spaces aren't being built because they like parking spaces. They're being built because the bylaw and history tells the town that they will need them, that they will have traffic and cars filling those spaces. And as we discussed before, the residential occupancy is by itself a far more intense use than the retirement home that used to be there. So we're going to have parking and spaces coming to and from those parking spaces more than doubling what would otherwise be allowed and more than triple what was there before. That will have a substantial impact upon this neighborhood, an adverse impact upon this neighborhood. So I would suggest that even if council is correct and you can grant waivers, I would nevertheless suggest to you that you should not grant this waiver because it is substantially different from what the bylaw anticipated and is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than what would otherwise be permitted. And that's what you've heard repeatedly from the neighbors at every one of these meetings. The last point I made to you in my letter of February 5th is that there is relief that is needed but has not been addressed by the applicant. By my reading of section 325-54-7B, they need a variance to alter this building for a different use. Now, alteration doesn't require an extension or a rebuilding. They're simply altering it by converting bedrooms into apartments, by changing the interior layout from 2 apartments, two dwelling units, 2 kitchens, to having 23 kitchens and separate living units, and by all the other changes that go along with it. When you have a non-conforming building, which this will remain, notwithstanding any special permit you might be asked to grant or do grant, the building itself remains greatly non-conforming, not just in the area of the lot size or setbacks or frontage, which is allowable under the non-conforming use and non-conforming structure section, but under section 54-7B, where it has other non-conformities, such as building height in this case, number of stories, habitable stories, the curb cut separations from other curb cuts and from intersections, all the other things that they have that are not conforming now mean that in order to get alterations permitted to this building, they need a variance from the Board of Appeals. And they have, to our knowledge, not applied for that and certainly haven't been granted that. So I suggested it is not right for site plan approval because they're not complying with that element of the zoning bylaw. And you should not grant the waivers requested or the special permit requested because this use is far more intense than what the bylaw that you just passed envisioned and intended. So we respectfully ask you to consider not just your authority, but also the propriety of granting that kind of relief and decide that the magnitude of the difference, more than doubling the occupancy and well more than doubling the traffic on this neighborhood based only on those waivers, is not appropriate, and I ask you not to do so for the benefit of the neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. We have other members of the public wish to address the board?
Yeah, I'll just chime in. I'm Jim McGrath. I live at 254 Bank Street. I agree 100% with Mr. Reed, with what he just said. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. McGrath. Rinkish, Mrs. Rinkish?
Hi, yes, this is Diane Rinkus. I'm here with my husband, John. And yes, we agree with Mr. Reed in his summary. We'd also sent a letter with similar information in that we want to make it clear that we're not opposed to multifamily dwelling. We are opposed vehemently to the issuances of variances, which would again, there's already been a change to the bylaws in September, so we're doing yet another change. And what my frustration is the Newman Properties purchased this property knowing what the current bylaws were. So I don't see the hardship in, I don't see the hardship in creating a building, a multi-use building within the current new bylaws. that the town has established in September. And I know that we put this issue to bed previously about the question of the need for housing in Harwich. And I don't think this fits the bill. And I would like to understand the justification from members of the board as to why you would be interested in granting these types of variances that would create, for a for-profit entity, far too dense of a population, and you have, in this proposal, there's an elimination of all types of green space in the area, where I was on a call 2 months ago where the convenience store across the street had all kinds of requirements for green space. And I would assume that green space would be more important in a residence. So I don't see a consistency of applying bylaws or whatever you want to call it, of conditions to development of properties. So my points are, I believe that the variances should not be granted because the developer can develop. They can put multiple units in there, stay within the bylaws, stay within a reasonable amount of units. You are still going to make money. It is still for profit, and it does not create any hardship on the residents or the density to the town. Thank you.
Mrs. Harder.
Hi, this is Elizabeth Harder from the Harwich Housing Authority. We need housing in Harwich. This is a perfect space for it. I know neighbors don't like having housing in their neighborhood, but apartments, when I was first in Harwich taking care of my mother, I rented a condo at Country Gardens. And people didn't even know it existed. And there were so many units in that complex. There were never cars. I used to go for walks. The worry about traffic, about parking, it's all a lovely way to say you don't want housing in your neighborhood, but we need housing. This is a great space for it. People will be able to walk to stores, to restaurants, to the library, to the park. And I'm desperately urging the committee to approve this. Thank you.
Well, I would like to respond. I think we went on the record saying that we're not opposed to housing, but this is 2 acres in Country Gardens. I understand is 30 acres back there. So no, you would not see an issue with parking or density. And these apartments are 10 by 10, 10 feet by 10 feet for $1,200 to $1,300 a month. So I don't think that solves a housing problem in Harwich. And I don't think you would put your mother in that.
I grew up in New York City, so that's luxurious compared to what most people in New York City can afford. I think apartments, people who have lived in houses all their life don't understand the concept of how warm and loving a small apartment can be. It's your little enclave away from the world, and it's lovely. And most of the time, you don't even want to leave it. So I'm not seeing the concern about density. I'm sorry. I mean, I live in Harwich Center, and I would welcome new neighbors. I would welcome life to bring energy to the area, and we need the housing. There's a great line that the Community Development Partnership came up with, which is we cannot afford to lose the people that can't afford to live here. And that means nurses, teachers, waiters, Stop and Shop and Shaw employees. We need housing. So that's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harder. Excuse me, this is not a housing hearing. We're here, remember, to inquire about whether or not this application meets the requirements that are legally set forth in the town bylaws for housing. for this application? That's the question. It's not whether or not we need the housing. And the other question is, can we make a decision based on the arguments put forth by the concerned parties? So I just want to make sure that we trim this conversation to the business at hand. And not, with all due respect, I appreciate the input, but that's not the criterion for the decisions this evening. Are there other comments about the nature of the application and the conditions that were brought forth by the applicants? Mr. Bowden.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Art Bowden, 800 Orleans Road, Harwich. I won't mention the H word, but I will mention I've been living at my house for 17 years now. And when I first moved in, tell me, on Route 39, there was a lot less traffic 17 years ago. And right now, there's constant traffic. But I'll tell you, I'm not running to the town hall and telling the people that are running the town to do something about it. It's just a matter of the way things happen. We're growing, we have more traffic, we have more people, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, that aside, I was at the last meeting and the comments that come up tonight, I didn't think we were going to hear the same, we're plowing the same fields again. We're talking about traffic. Traffic is an important thing. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be solved. We're talking about parking. It's important. I want to know where I'm going to park my car, a truck or whatever. That's important. But I think all these issues have been talked about, and I think the developer has addressed them and addressed them appropriately. And I don't know why we're going back over the same field again. I keep hearing it, and I'm dismayed that this is the way it's going to continue. There's no resolution here if this is going to continue forever. Anyways, I'll leave the comments at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. Mr. Winston.
Once again, I have to say I would, number one, I would like it, please, that you read every single letter from every single abutter. As far as the neighborhood is concerned, as a previous owner of this particular parcel, since 1979, at 29 years old, I bought the real estate for $20,000 from Eleanor Thompson. I know when Country Meadows was constructed, there was a bylaw, and you all know I am not going to lecture to any member of our planning board. I am only a citizen who was born in this town in 1951 and loves the town and has given everything that I have to the town of Harwich. And you cannot tell me, Elizabeth Harder, or anyone else, that I don't love affordable housing because I'm chairman of the board of Midcape Church Homes. This is not about affordable housing. This is about you as a planning board. And Charlene Greeno at her last meeting, trying to shove down the throat of us in this neighborhood, something that is absolutely inappropriate. And as my attorney has already spoken to you, you are now asked, you are being told by Charlene Greeno that you have the right to waive every single zoning guide law we've had. Behind our backs, in the middle of this pandemic, this group, Ms. Greeno and Mr. Zender, and the developer here have gone to the town meeting and threw out all the guidelines. So when my partner David and I wanted 4 bedrooms for our retirement center in 1986, we were denied. So that Bradgate and its Country Meadows, Ms. Harder, Country Meadows is the name of the complex. Country Meadows got 60 kitchens. I was denied 4. Now, my town wants to give to this developer from Brookline 26 kitchens. And you're telling me that in actuality, that it will make no difference on that piece of real estate, which is 1.8 acres of land. It will make no difference. I mean, it's not going to interfere with the traffic. It's not going to interfere with the flow into Grassy Pond. You're telling me 26 kitchens. I couldn't have 4. This is so inappropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Above and beyond that, I just have to say one more thing. one more thing. Not only has it been, we have been deceived by a town meeting and bylaws were changed so that now 1,500 feet is no longer necessary between two multifamily complexes. But we're also being told that this project originally required 10 contiguous acres. And now that also got thrown out at the town meeting during the pandemic by Mr. Zender and his group. Ms. Grino has not updated us lately on the traffic concerns about this particular project. She has actually negotiated it the way she wanted to negotiate it. I am very sorry. I am not.
Point of order, this is totally inappropriate and unacceptable. I'm sorry. This is inappropriate.
I think we have to kind of step back from the ad hominem thing here. Again, the question is, facing the board is this a project that meets the requirements of the zoning laws of the town of Harwich? Does the application meet the requirements? That's the question. I'd like to bring this back to the board, please. Do I have a feeling here for what we'd like to do? Because it looks as though from what we've heard from Mr. Zender, we heard from Ms. Greenhouse about the nature of the application in great detail. We heard from Mr. Reed about his objections. Now it's in our court, and we've heard from the public. So, and we have all the letters. We have, 30 letters or so on file that we've all read and gone through. I think it's time now to step up and ask ourselves, does this application meet the requirements as they're set forth with the all the notes that we have from staff comments? Again, this has gone through all of the different offices in the town, DPW, police. We've had discussions about highway, engineering, conservation, fire chief. It's all gone through. So I think we've covered every base on here.
Mr. Chairman.
Both sides, all arguments. Well, how would the board like to continue? Mr. Chadwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it's appropriate and there are no more comments from the public or the planning board, I move the vote.
Well, I think what we first have to do is see whether or not we're going to close the hearing. Do we have all the input?
I'll make a motion that we close the hearing then.
I have a motion.
We have some more comments, I believe.
Beg pardon, Alan?
I think people had their hands up.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see anybody. Who had their hand up?
Me.
Mr. Winston, okay. I just urge that we keep this on the law.
I would like to request
personalities.
Who's talking? Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would like to request that the letters be read publicly, please.
Well, I think we've all, have we not all gone through these? These are all been on the record. They've been on the web. We've received 3 packets with them. I think we're all familiar with the contents. This is not, it's not like we have 2 letters or something like that. This is considerable amount of volume, particularly in the case of your Mr. Reed's, multiple page letters, including attachments. So I think I'm going to have to forego that just for the sake of expedience of moving this conversation ahead of how the board wishes to proceed. Ms. Rinkus.
Yes, I would like to understand what would be the justification for the proposed waiving of variances.
Well, Ms. Greenhouse, thank you.
There are no variances regarding this application before this board at this time.
So then maybe I misspoke. What are you voting on? What is the justification for your yes vote to allow this project to go in as opposed. The way I understand it, they're requesting alterations to existing bylaws, conditions. Again, I may not be using the appropriate terminology, but I would like to understand what would be the justification for an approval of this project, knowing that it does not meet current, is it bylaws? Is that the correct term? Town variances, town ordinances?
May I correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we have it right here in the packet that everybody has before them. The planning staff comments have set forth every aspect of what we're looking at here, which is essentially as far as we have here the special permits for multifamily use.
Okay.
Special permits for site plan review and the overlay district. So there are 3 layers. We've gone through all of these, and the application is very clear about requesting. We had 5 different chunks with 3 to 7 points beneath each one. So we can't review. That was the whole purpose of the first third of this meeting, was reviewing each one of those. So that's what you were listening to. So again, Mr. Peterson?
But that didn't answer my question. My question was, what is the justification to allow this project to go in as opposed and not have the developer stay within the current project codes? You can still
I don't know how much, I don't know how to tell you. The arguments were put forth in the application. The application has been reviewed point by point, and those are the very issues you're asking about. That I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm assuming you've got the material right in front of you. The justification is that we have certain requirements for special permit granting, and that authority exists in the board. The question is the board going to go ahead with granting these special permits?
Mr. Peterson. I think what she was asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, basically like we have these laws in place, these bylaws in place, and how, and I think you just kind of answered it, how do we have the power to just kind of wave goodbye to parts of it and minimize and take away, like waive some of the things that are in the bylaws? I guess, is that the question you're asking? Like, how do we?
Yes, yes.
Like if the bylaw says a setback of 50 feet and we want to waive that setback, then how do we have that power? Is that your question?
Yes, because just because somebody asks doesn't mean they necessarily get granted, correct? And that it can be utilized as a multi-purpose, multi-dwelling unit without all those changes. So I'm struggling as to why would the town want to allow more changes when they can still have multiple units? I don't understand.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
This is Mr. Zenner. May I speak?
Yes, please.
Oh, well, first of all, I think if the board is trying to understand its authority to waive the parking requirements, I'd like to, as a general comment, say, look, these objections that have been posed by various speakers tonight have, to a person, never been articulated as to why locating cars 10 feet off the property line instead of 50 feet off the property line is going to create a detriment to the neighborhood. Every one of these objections is a reverse objection. The tail is wagging the dog. They're trying to get this board to refuse to grant waivers so that the number of units can be compressed down to, I think as Mr. Reed said, I think it was 13 units. So the authority of this board is under the Harwich Center Overlay District, which was specifically designed to allow a relaxation of certain dimensional requirements so that you could have the business and residences coexisting in a central district in your town. And so the standard that you're operating under is that the board may waive or modify these dimensional requirements if it finds that such waiver or modification will not substantially derogate from the purpose and intent of the bylaw. And in this particular case, in this particular district, in this particular neighborhood and this location, locating these parking spaces 10 feet from the property line instead of 50, where many of the existing spaces are already within the 50-foot setback, is not going to be substantially more detrimental, especially when you consider the benefits that this project is providing to the town, which is providing multifamily dwelling, which is specifically provided for and for which we comply with every dimensional requirement in this district. And so to answer the lady's question, the authority is under the HCO provisions that allows you to waive any of those dimensional requirements if you find that it's not substantially met, it's not going to create a substantial detriment. And I think the board is well within its right to find, based on the fact that there's been no evidence adduced at all, that the location of these parking spots as proposed is going to create some detriment to the neighborhood. And I would further say that the parking of cars an additional 40 feet closer to the parking line is not going to create any detriment to the neighborhood. It's not going, and this is going to be used to decrease congestion. It'll provide for significant off-street parking, and it'll provide the ability for the town to produce what you're here to do tonight, which is to approve multifamily dwellings that meet your new bylaw. So the authority is under the HCO district, if that's the simplest answer I can give you. And thank you.
Mr. Chair.
That's Mr. Reed.
Mr. Chair, I have to respectfully disagree. It's not a question of whether you're going to locate parking spaces too close to the lot lines. It's a question of whether you're going to squeeze in extra parking spaces that don't otherwise fit on the site in order to facilitate a doubling of the occupancy limit of the building. That is exactly why it's detrimental to the neighborhood, because it's doubling the occupancy and more than doubling the traffic that's going to come to and from the site. It's not just whether a particular space is going to be located too close to the lot line. It's doubling the number of spaces by squeezing them into the space where they don't belong. That's what the waiver is all about.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Mr. Harris. I think you have to take your mute off, Dave. Sorry. Dave, you must have frozen because I can't hear you. Charlene, is he on mute or unmuted?
Hi, sorry.
Oh, there we
the
go.
town is woefully short of market rate housing for workers, for, you know, and that's been described in other discussions by the.
This is not market rate.
One of the commenters earlier. There is no perfect site that provides everything in accordance with the town's bylaws and with respect to setbacks and other criteria. So we're faced with providing some waivers to allow the town to have additional market rate housing and a couple of low income housing units, which are sorely needed. It's unfortunate that this causes concerns by some of the neighbors. So the planning board is tasked with deciding which of these needs best serves the town. I don't know if that's how I kind of feel about it. I don't know if it helps all of you who are here on this hearing tonight.
Thank you, Dave. Ms. Allen, did you have any additional points to make here? Mary?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Just
Could
a
you
second,
recognize
Craig.
Mary Moody?
I'm sorry, I didn't see that she was had a hand wave. I was still trying to get a consensus from the board here. Craig, did you have any thoughts here to weigh in?
I have no further comments at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Moody, thank you. Sorry, I did not see you raise your hand.
I'm sorry, we had difficulty getting on before. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for letting me speak. I want to be clear, our
Could you just identify your address?
I am Marla Menzies. I am an abutter at 321 Bank Street.
Thank you.
We've been very frustrated through all of the meetings that we have attended because many times they devolved into a discussion where the public was not allowed to give their opinion. And many of us have written several letters about our concerns, and we've never had our concerns addressed. Our biggest challenge, my challenge to the planning board is this, that if 43 cars and 43 plus people applied to live on the lot next to you, you too would raise questions and concerns about density, parking, maintenance, absence of a manager, pollution, ground light and noise, vehicle and pedestrian hazards. And you would expect these concerns would be addressed by the developer and/or your town government. But no attempt by the planning board or the representatives of the Royal or Newman properties to address these issues or indeed be a good neighbor has been forthcoming. My hope is that that will change. And what I'm looking for from this meeting is for some discussion to be given to us as the neighbors to address some of these concerns. The Office of Housing and Urban Development under Section 6B of the United States Housing Act of 2020 set the standards for modest but decent housing as follows. A studio at 500 square feet, a one-bedroom at 700 square feet, and a two-bedroom at 900 square feet. I would like to note that 6 of the studios and 7 out of 8 of the one-bedroom units fall below the square footage deemed modest but decent housing by HUD. That is half of the 26 proposed units that are substandard in regard to square footage. For the Royal Apartments to charge market rate prices for apartments smaller than the HUD recommendations borders on unethical. Planning board members, this is your town. We are your constituents. We have legitimate concerns about parking and density that need to be addressed regarding the proposed development of the Royal Apartments LLC. With proposals by the Stone Horse LLC to convert already built dorms into 22 one-bedrooms, and with more affordable housing land being considered in the pipeline, there may be less pressure to push forward such a high-density project on too small a piece of land and create room to negotiate a reduction in density with the Royal Properties LLC. I hope you will consider some of these comments, and I would like to see some of these concerns addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your input, and I just wanted to say, of course, we're interested. That's why we're having these hearings, and that's why we're listening and reading letters and having all this input and having, frankly, hours of discussion wrestling with these competing concerns about the use of the property and the what's set forth in the law and what's legal and what's not legal. That's the issue that we're wrestling with. Did I see anybody else? Did we not have a motion on the floor to close the public hearing, Mr. Chadwick? I believe we have one that's still open.
Yes, we do, sir.
So what's our status with that? Shall we close the hearing?
I don't know if anyone seconded, Duncan.
I did. David Harris seconded it.
Okay, Dave, you got a second? So shall we close the hearing and then start our conversation? I think we have really solid kind of competitive points of view here that we need to discuss and hammer out. So I think the sooner we get to that, the better off all parties will be. Mr. Peterson.
Chair, do you have to do a roll call vote for the?
That's correct. Are we ready for that? We have a motion and a second. All right. Roll call vote. Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris,
David Harris, aye.
Mary Maslowski,
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson,
Alan Peterson, aye.
Arthur Rouse,
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Bill Stoltz. Bill, you there? I don't hear you.
I'm sorry. Bill Stoltz, aye.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, what's the will of the board?
Mr. Chair, this is Mary.
Hi,
I
Mary.
move that we vote to approve the following waivers and accept the reasons for the waivers provided. One, waive the filing fee. 2, variance notation on the plan. 3, existing driveways within 100 feet of the site. 4, lighting. 5, freestanding sign. And 6, a parking area setback requirements.
David Harris, second.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. We have a motion and a second. We ready to vote? Roll call vote. Duncan Berry, I vote aye. Mr. Chadwick?
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris?
David Harris, aye.
Mary Maslowski?
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson?
Alan Peterson, aye.
Arthur Rouse?
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Bill Stoltz?
Bill Stoltz, nay.
Nay. Thank you. Ms. Maslowski?
Mr. Chair, I move that we vote to adopt the following findings of fact. 1, the property is located within the M-R-L zoning district in the Harwich Center Overlay District. 2, the existing structure has been used as an assisted living facility containing 31 units. 3, 26 apartment units are proposed, all of which meet the minimum floor area requirements. 4, appropriate and adequate parking shall be provided on the subject site. 5, multifamily use is allowable within the MR-L zoning district with a special permit. 6, the Harwich Center Overlay District allows for waivers from dimensional provisions. 7, 2 of the units will be held in perpetuity for low and moderate income families consistent with HUD guidelines. 8, the use as developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood. 9, the specific site is an appropriate location for such a use. 10, the design is appropriate and consistent patterns of village development. 11, there will be no nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians. 12, adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operation of the proposed use, including appropriate sewage treatment.
We have a motion?
David Harris, second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rouse. Any discussion? With that language in there? Okay, let's take a vote here. I think, so Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick?
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris?
David Harris, aye.
Mary Maslowski?
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson?
Alan Peterson, aye.
Arthur Rouse?
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Mr. Stoltz?
Bill Stoltz, nay.
Thank you.
Mr. Berry, point of order, if I might.
Yes.
Just a reminder to the board that for the special permits, a vote of affirmative vote of 5 members is required to pass a special permit. And if anyone is voting against a motion, and generally there are motions to approve, they're generally in the positive, not the negative. But if somebody does vote not to approve, they really do need to state the reasons why.
Very good. And we have 7 voting on this?
6.
Yes, with Mr. Rouse voting and Mr. McParland not. Yes.
Right. That's 3, that's 7 of us. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I move that we vote on the multifamily use special permit. And I move that we vote to approve with conditions, case PB 2020-26, the Royal Apartments LLC for a use special permit for multifamily use pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Section 325-51.Q, approved at the 9/26/2020 town meeting for property located at 328 Bank Street, map 41, parcel N4 in the M-R-L zoning district, based on the aforementioned findings of fact and the fact that the application meets the necessary requirements and criteria for approval pursuant to the code of the town of Harwich. The following conditions are imposed. 1, a passing Title V inspection be submitted to the health department prior to any building permit approval. 2, studio units shall be held in perpetuity for rental exclusively to persons meeting the guidelines for low and moderate income families as determined by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, published income guidelines, and as may from time to time be amended, said deed restriction shall be held by the town of Harwich in a form approved by town council. 3, all signage shall comply with the sign code, historic district and historical commission and building department requirements. 4, this decision shall be recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds.
David Harris, second.
Thank you. David. Any discussion? Let's take a vote. Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
Thank you, Craig. David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Mary Maslowski.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Arthur Rouse.
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, nay.
And a comment on that, Bill?
I'm not in agreement with the waivers for the parking setbacks.
Parking, okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Stoltz. Mary?
Mr. Chair, I move that we now vote on the Harwich Center Overlay District Special Permit and vote to approve the case number PB 2020-26, the Royal Apartments LLC for a special permit pursuant to the provision of Chapter 325-51O, to Harwich Center Overlay District of the Code of the Town of Harwich for property located at 328 Bank Street, map 41, parcel N4 in the M-R-L zoning district, based on the aforementioned findings of fact and the fact that the application meets the necessary requirements and criteria for approval pursuant to the code of the town of Harwich.
David Harris, aye. David, second.
Thank you, David, for the second. Any comments? No comment. Roll call vote. Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Mary Maslowski.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Arthur Rouse.
Arthur Rouse, aye.
And Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, nay.
Thank you, folks. We have a site plan.
So
Mary, you're still muted, I think. Sorry. Thank you.
thank you, sorry. Mr. Chair, I move that we now vote on the site plan review special permit and vote to approve with conditions, case number PB 2020-26, the Royal Apartments LLC for site plan review for the proposed use, multifamily and additional parking and other appurtenances pursuant to the code of the town of Harwich, section 325-55 for property located at 328 Bank Street, map 41, parcel N4 in the M-R-L zoning district. The decision is based on the aforementioned findings of fact, the fact that the application meets the necessary requirements and criteria for approval pursuant to the code of the town of Harwich, and the fact that the multifamily use is permitted by special permit in the zoning district. The following conditions are imposed. 1, erosion control shall be installed and maintained during construction on the 100-foot conservation buffer line to ensure work stays out of conservation jurisdiction. Permits from conservation shall be required if work will enter conservation jurisdiction. 2, a passing Title V inspection shall be submitted to the health department prior to any building permit approval. 3, the existing fence on Bank Street shall be removed and or reduced in height to meet the provisions of the height bylaw.
Even worse.
Excuse me, please.
4, prior to the issuance of a building permit and in lieu of constructing a sidewalk along Parallel Street, the applicant shall submit $10,000 to the town of Harwich through the planning office for the sidewalk fund. 5, all signage shall comply with the sign code, historic district and historical commission and building department requirements. 6, all lighting shall comply with the lighting code and historic district and historical commission requirements. 7, appropriate approvals from the historic district and historical commission shall be obtained and required. 8, any changes to the approved site may require additional review and approvals from the planning board and the historic district and historical commission. 9, this decision shall be recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds. And 10, conformance with all review procedure requirements outlined pursuant to chapter 400, section 18.g inspection. Certificate of completion and as-built plans of the code of the town of Harwich shall be met.
Craig Chadwick,
David Harris, second.
Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. Thank you, Mary. Any comments, any questions from the board? Let's take our vote. Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Mary Maslowski.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Arthur Rouse.
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Thank you, Mr. Stoltz. Thank you, folks.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
This is Ben Sender. Would the chair mind just checking the votes on the Harwich Thunder Overlay District? I only recorded 5 affirmative votes and 1 negative vote on that.
Yes, we have Berry, Chadwick, Harris, Maslowski, Peterson, and Rouse in the affirmative.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I get off, I want to thank the board for reviewing the matter and for everybody else who participated.
I thank everybody for their participation. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate your goodwill on both sides of the coin on this one. This is not an easy matter at all for any of us. Next item on our agenda this evening is continuance from PB 2020-33 Main Street, Stone Horse, applicant and owner, care of William F. Riley, Esquire, representative, seeks a new use special permit to convert one of the 2 dormitory buildings, specifically the building known as 868 Route 28, into 22 one-bedroom apartments, and to amend the previously approved site plan review special permit granted under case PB 2019-13 with additional parking requirement and other waivers. The application is pursuant to the code of the town of Harwich, section 325-51Q, multifamily use, and 325-55, site plan review. Property is located at 872 Route 28, map 25, parcel A2, and is located in the CH-1 zoning district. This hearing is being continued from January 26th. And I see that the applicant has requested a withdrawal without prejudice of this application.
Yes, they have.
Yeah, okay. So that concludes our public hearings for the evening.
No, you do need to vote on that.
Oh,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sorry, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Mr.
Mary.
Chairman?
So through you, Mr. Chair, to Charlene, do we actually need to close the public hearing before we move to allow the permitted withdrawal?
I do not believe that you do. There's others on the board who believe you do. So however you want to handle it is fine by me.
Okay, just checking.
Thank you, Craig.
I would like to make a motion that we close the public hearing.
David Harris, second.
Very good. Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Joe McFarland, are you still with us? Nope. Mary Maslowski.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Arthur Rouse.
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I move that we allow for the withdrawal without prejudice of matter PB 2020-33, Main Street Stone Horse LLC.
David Harris, second.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Roll call vote. Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Joe McFarland is not here. Mary Maslowski.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Arthur Peterson. Alan Peterson. Oh my gosh, sorry.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Thank you, Alan. Arthur Rouse.
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Thank you, Bill. Okay. We have new business. We have 3 sets of minutes to review. Although I thought at the last one we reviewed the January 12th minutes, or was that the?
You did not have them, so you didn't.
Okay, what is
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of January 12th, 2021, January 23rd, 2021, and February 9th, 2021.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. Roll call vote. Duncan Berry to accept the minutes of the 12th, the 23rd, and February 9th. Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Mary Maslowski.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Arthur Rouse.
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Conversation for item number 2, zoning amendment, discussions and possible votes. West Harwich Special District. My quick report on this is that I met with, that provided design guideline language, as we discussed in our last meeting, to the Cape Cod Commission. They are now currently synthesizing that material and producing some visuals. I hope to hear from them this week with a date of completion before the end of the month.
There is a little bit more to this.
Oh, good, good.
So before you had asked me to work on 2 zoning amendments for this next town meeting. And the first does have to do with the West Harwich Special District. It's very brief. It would be to see if the town would vote to amend the Harwich Code, the Code of the Town of Harwich, zoning Article 24, West Harwich Special District, by adding a new section 325-160 as follows. For the purposes of this section, the Harwich Planning Board shall adopt, quote, West Harwich Special District site and architectural design guidelines, unquote, which shall constitute rules and regulations guiding historic structures and new construction within the West Harwich Special District.
Great. Very straightforward. A simple proposition. Bang, right?
Exactly. And what originally we were going to try and lump everything in the zoning bylaw, and we pulled way back from that because that was just a little over the top. So what this would do is allow for the board the time that it needs to establish the West Harwich Special District site and architectural design guidelines, which would then be adopted, assuming that this was approved at town meeting, if that's the direction the board would like to go.
Thank you. Any comments on that? None. Okay.
Well, if this is going to go forward, what the recommended motion would be to move to refer to accept this proposed amendment and refer it to the Board of Selectmen for referral back to the Planning Board to begin the public hearing process.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. So I've got a motion by Mary and a second by, I think it's Dave.
Oh, I have a motion by Alan, second by Mary.
Yeah.
Whatever. All right.
Mary and Mary.
Yeah.
Could be Mary.
So roll call vote. Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Mary Maslowski,
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson,
Alan Peterson, aye.
Arthur Rouse,
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Bill Stoltz.
Bill?
I think you might.
Sorry, I was muted. Bill Stoltz, aye.
Thanks, Bill. So we have a parking zoning bylaw in MRL and MRL1 zoning districts to discuss.
Yes, so this is the second one that the board asked me to work on. And this kind of goes back to the public hearing that you all just approved for the Royal. This was inadvertently missed when we went through the entire zoning bylaw relative to multifamily. And what this would ultimately do is change the setbacks for parking in the MRL and MRL1 zoning districts for the side, street side and rear, and would add footnotes. And there'd be two parts. So footnote 2, part 1, on already improved properties, the setbacks for parking shall be established at the time of the site plan review. So for example, the application you saw this evening, those parking spaces closest to Parallel Street actually already exist.
Right.
And then the second, for vacant land to be developed for the purposes other than a single family, 2-family, or single family with accessory apartment, the minimum setbacks for parking shall be 20 feet from the street and 10 feet from the sideline and rear property line.
Okay. Clear enough to me.
Can I make a comment?
For this parking,
I think Bill had something, Duncan?
Yep, sorry, Bill, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like the board to consider that the setbacks be the same for the parking in the residential area as it is for the buildings. So I believe the setback in the front would be 25. Setback on the sides would be 20. Setback on back, I believe, is 25. Residential area.
Just as a comment, that's not consistent with parking setbacks anywhere else. The setbacks for building and parking have generally been different. Why, I don't know, but.
Yeah, I don't understand why either, but I think where we're putting multi-family units in a residential area.
This isn't just multifamily though. In the MRL zoning district, it's not just, there's other uses that are permitted in the MRL zoning, not just multifamily.
Right. Well, that's my opinion. I would like the board to think about it anyways.
What are those setbacks again, Bill?
25 for the front, 25 for the back, 20 on each side.
So 25 from road, 25 from rear.
And 20 from the sides.
And 20 from the side.
David, what are your thoughts on that?
This is all new to me. I haven't given it any conscious thought.
So in terms of consistency though, Charlene, that would be kind of going against the grain of what we have in other zones, or?
I mean, frankly, it doesn't really matter. It's just in other zoning districts like the CH1 and CH2, the setbacks for buildings are different than they are for these parking setbacks. Right, wrong, and different, I don't think it really matters, quite honestly. If the board wants to go with the 25 from road and rear and 20 from side, that's fine too.
Just out of curiosity, Bill, is there a argument against that you would think would just for the exercise of working through the idea.
So I'm mostly going by the setbacks that they use in residential areas for building a new house. And I just don't think that if they're going to be building new residential multifamily places, that it would be fair to the neighbors surrounding that unit to at least give us the setbacks that would happen within a residential area.
Right. Mary, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
That's okay. Just my only comment is that, I do think with our village overlay districts that we do need the ability to have the waivers. We, on Historic District and Historic Commission, the waivers became really important when it came to us permitting the new building at 711 Main Street in the district. So the ability to know that they could be on the street and that the parking could have waivers, I personally think it's why that project was able to happen the way it did. And I think it's going to be a beautiful addition to the historic district once it's finished. I mean, I already think it looks great myself. So I don't object to, correcting or fixing or having any of the setbacks, but I do think that overlay district in both Harwich Port, in Harwich Center, and possibly when people start looking at the West Harwich Village District, I think the ability to have those waivers is important in looking at that site plan review and looking at those developments.
Ironically, the Harwich Center Overlay District, if you look at the map, doesn't include the property that you all just approved earlier this evening. However, there's a footnote that says that property, as well as the property where the junior theater is, the old rec building, are included.
Really?
It makes no sense, but those are the only two properties in the MRL zoning district that are in an overlay district.
Interesting.
So in an overlay district, you do have the ability to waive setbacks, period.
Okay.
So that does not go away. So if in the future, the Harwich Junior Theater comes, you can waive those again if you want. So that does not go away, Mary.
Okay, that was my only concern.
Okay, interesting.
And I thought that was the way it was, that they could still ask for a waiver. Then I think it's a good idea.
If the board is good with this, I mean, this is not something that needs to happen now. It just would help to make things a little more consistent. If the board wants, you can make a motion to accept this with the changes made by Bill Stoltz, and send it to the Board of Selectmen to begin the public hearing process.
What do you think? More conversation here?
I think Mary just said so moved, but I'm not sure.
Did you say that? Okay, do we have a second?
Craig Chadwick, second.
Okay, well, let's take a vote. I think we're ready to vote on it. Duncan, Barry, aye. Craig Chadwick?
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris?
David Harris, aye.
Joe McFarland? Not here. Mary Maslowski?
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson?
Alan Peterson, aye.
Arthur Rouse?
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Bill Stoltz?
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
We have the zoning board of appeal opinions in agenda, this item 4A3.
There's only one that I wanted to bring to the board's attention, and I actually already wrote a letter as the town planner.
Okay.
It's case number 2020-53, and it's at 23 Bascom Hollow Road.
Okay.
And this is the newer subdivision that is located off of 39. That was done by Eastwood Companies. And they are seeking a variance from the site coverage using the shape factor of a panhandle lot as their argument as to why it should be granted a variance. And my response to this was, well, you chose to do a panhandle lot there. No one said you had to do a panhandle lot. It's what you chose to do. So it's really not, you shouldn't be getting a variance. So I wrote that opinion letter as the town planner, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And it's a significant variance as well.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with Charlene.
Yeah, I think I recall this when it came up, what was it, maybe 2019? Originally, that shape. So I think we need to make a motion on these opinions.
The letter's already gone, so you don't need to make a motion. I already did it as the planner. I just wanted to bring it to your attention, you know, that they're trying to, you know, on the one hand, use this opportunity, and then on the other hand, use it as a hardship as to why they need a variance.
Right. Right.
Double whammy.
Like the old, I killed my parents, but now I'm an orphan, so have pity.
Oh,
that's a really close analogy.
That came out a little too quick.
Yeah.
If the statute of limitations expired.
You tonight and forever.
Thank you, Charlene.
Well, thank you, Charlene.
This is the long goodbye.
Charlene, enjoy your retirement.
Thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to it.
And I'm
sure we'll enjoy having your touch on the packets, and as we move forward, we'll see your light touch there, right?
Well, actually, so far I have no contract to do anything any further than next week. So I'm not sure what is happening, but the packet that you guys will get for March 9th will definitely have my touches on it, because I'll be doing all of that for that meeting. Beyond that, I honestly don't know.
Okay. Do we have any other old business then that we need to hear about, Mary, about perhaps of the historical commission or other board activities? Nothing? Okay. Well, I'd be willing to entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay.
I can have it, I'll second it.
Yeah, there we go. Duncan Berry, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Mary Maslowski.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Alan Peterson.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Thank you all for your patience with me this evening. This was really.
Sir.
Sorry.
Thank you, everybody. I thought I got. All right. Sorry, Arthur.
That's fine. Aye. I say good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.